RSMC, can you get this going? Ma'am, once I got our class going on.
No worries. Here's our problem.
Yeah. Excuse me, you got the sound on.
Here we go. Okay. I think we're good. I'm gonna check it over here. Can you look at it like that? Yeah, that's good. All right, are we ready to start? Yep. All right. Thank you all for coming this afternoon, and to those that are joining us that are not here but are listening and watching. You will recall that we had a series of meetings back in January and February with teachers that had been identified for the advanced teacher pathway in the district. And we asked you for lots of information. What would it take to get you to take on a teacher leader role? And you were very frank and forthright and thorough about what you shared with us. That would be things that would be incentives or things that would be disincentives for you to take that role on. So to summarize the feedback that we got from January and February, one of the things that you all said that was clearly understood was provide additional compensation that's appropriate to the scope of the work and the extra duties that you would be asked to take on. And that'll be a large part of what we'll talk about today. And again, I'm going to solicit some feedback from you regarding that. The second most common thing that we heard, and we heard it everywhere we went very loudly, is limit the amount of time that teachers are out of classrooms supporting other teachers or participating in professional development. Every group that we met with said, we're interested in this, but don't take me out of my classroom. Don't impact the success of my students. And so we've heard that as well. Determine a minimal system for documentation of the process and support that doesn't cause extra paperwork. There'll have to be some documentation because there'll be some compensation involved, but we do want to try to minimize that for you. And so we heard that in terms of your feedback. Provide training that's meaningful, that's an important word, that grows the skills of advanced teachers and addresses areas for advanced teacher growth and development. And some of the examples that you gave us in your feedback included EVOS training, Project CHRIS training, technology integration, growth mindset, how to provide feedback to students and other adults, and engagement activities and things that would fall into those categories. You also asked us to create opportunities for you to collaborate with other teachers that are successfully introducing new ideas or teaching content in a new way. And then finally, provide appropriate training to support quality colleagues to be successful in this leader role. So if we categorize the things that you all told us, it would fall into one of those 6 categories. So from that, our team, led by Dr. Paula Wilkins and myself, and some of you all that are present here on the team as well, tried to develop some pathways that would honor your desire to be part of this teacher leader effort in the district, but also honor your concerns. So I'm going to show you 4 pathways. It'll have a different title, a different launch, a different description, and a different sort of incentive. And as we're doing that, I want to get some feedback from you about, is this going to work for you? Is that incentive going to work for you? Is that the kind of support? But what I'd like to do is show you all 4 of them and go through those in some detail, and then go back to each one and give you an opportunity to provide some feedback. So if you look at Pathway 1 is about model classrooms, and we would begin to train for that in April and May of this year. Individual teachers or teams of no more than 3 teachers would observe in a classroom and collect data following a protocol that includes descriptive but not evaluative information. It would be specific, it would be about the instructional core, and it would be related to an instructional area of focus. So quality colleagues and individual teachers or small teams of teachers would discuss classroom observations following these 4 steps. The first is describe what you saw. The second is analyze the descriptive evidence. What patterns do you see? Should be 5 questions, shouldn't, excuse me. How might you group that sort of data? Predict what you think students are learning. And an interesting question, if you were a student in this class or school and you did everything the teacher just asked you to do, what would you know and be able to do? And so the visits to the quality colleague classrooms will be coordinated by Assistant Superintendent's Office based on advanced teacher lists provided by HR. And the reason for that bottom part is if folks are going to come see a classroom or a school, they want to see a classroom or a school that's similar to their classroom. And we know that we have lots of different kinds of classrooms across the district, so we wouldn't want to send you to some place that doesn't look like your school or doesn't look like your content, so we would want to match that up. If you look in the incentive column there, what we have out there as a draft is $100 per classroom visit for preparation, conferencing, and debriefing, not to exceed $500 for 5 sessions. So you're not getting paid to teach the lesson, because that's what you naturally do. But that compensation would be about preparing for somebody else to come in your classroom, taking the time, probably your planning period, to conference and debrief with them about what they saw. So that would be pathway 1. And again, we're going to look at all 4, and then I'll go back and get some feedback. Note that pathway 1 does not pull you out of your classroom, but it does have somebody push into your classroom. Pathway 2 is about peer support, and we would have some training in the spring, but we would launch in the fall. So the description of this pathway is quality colleagues will commit to supporting up to 2 teachers in their current school or a nearby school. That was another piece of feedback that you all gave us. And support them with lesson planning, mindset and relationships, and/or data analysis this coming fall. So training would be received in instructional rounds format, growth mindset, cognitive coaching, adult learning theory, how to give feedback. You might be interested in producing some content for the CLC, and that training would take place, or at least begin to take place, on some Saturdays, and it's actually not going to be March and April, it's going to be April and May, and I'll show you specifically those dates in just a moment. So the incentive or the compensation column on the right-hand side says that you would receive $25 per hour for the Saturday professional development stipend, and that's standard in the district. Those professional developments would be half a day, so you'd be there for 4 hours from 8 to 12, so you'd earn $100 for one and $100 for the other. You also might be able to earn a $750 stipend to attend like a summer institute kind of training. In 16-17, the proposal is $1,000 per year for planning, the before and after school time discussions, the time for reflection and the written feedback, and the opportunity to support peers. And that would be monitored based on Teacher Academy success indicators that our committee is continuing to develop. Let me let you take a look at Pathway 3. Pathway 3 is another way that you could be part of the advanced teacher pathway without having to leave the classroom. It would launch in the fall of 2016, and it's around professional development. So the quality colleague would commit to developing and providing professional learning opportunities for teachers around our big 3 topics: lesson planning, data analysis, mindset, and relationships. In the far right-hand side on the incentive, you would see that that would be $500 per approved PD offering, and that includes the time for developing the PD and also delivery. I'm going to stop for just a moment here on Pathway 3 on professional development, because my friend Heather, who's here from technology, wants to add or let you know about another opportunity that will relate into this pathway.
Thank you. So I'm here really kind of to recruit and give you an example of what this might look like. So related to lesson planning from the technology department, we are very interested in supporting teachers as they move to Haiku as a platform for engaging lesson plans. I have 7 district coaches that support all 81 schools, so we're looking to you guys possibly to help us build capacity and helping teachers use that platform to deliver some of their lesson plans. So I wanted to show you this opportunity. Those of you that are interested, please email me, let me know. I'll make sure that you have my contact. But with this one in particular, what you would do, and sorry, we had several browsers open earlier. So you,
The master teacher thing is, it says 233, and that's what was in our email, right?
they switched rooms.
They switched it around and you may or may not have gotten a second email.
I got nothing.
Okay, you're in the right place now, and we apologize for the confusion. Yes, sir.
Those
So what
PowerPoints
did I
being
miss?
available to us online.
I beg your pardon?
PowerPoints, you're pretty.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
I'll show you where all that is in the end, but let's see, why are you not seeing that over there? Let's see. Okay. So what we're looking at in this particular, the professional development is built already. So it would be a stipend for you guys to go through this that would teach you everything there is to possibly know about haiku. So the stipend would be to actually go through it in the spring as a blended course. So it's not there's some face-to-face in the beginning to get you started and at the end, but most of it's done on your own time. And then as you go through that, we're looking for folks like you guys in the fall to be able to deliver some haiku support in your zone. So not just your school, but as you go back to be able to deliver some of that PD that falls in line with that. Number 3 there. So just to give you an idea, notice on the side, there are 8 goals, and they are all aligned with everything there is to know about haiku. But it is also targeted to be at your own pace. So if we look at goal 1, which is how you build content, it's set up for you these are the goals to go through. These are the different areas. You'll learn the skill, you'll produce an artifact, you'll end up sharing that. But if you feel like you already know how to build content in haiku, you can click on assess and test out of that. And that gives you credit for the skill level. So each of those 8 goals, it's possible that if you know a lot about this already, you can test out of a lot of it, and then the rest of it's blended. On your own, you go through and learn, you produce some artifacts. But at the end, we want to set you up to know a lot about haiku so that you could turn around and deliver some PD. So that is one opportunity for you this spring if you're interested in going through a blended course like that, and then helping us deliver some PD in the fall. So that's my plug for recruitment.
I told Heather I call it credit by demonstrated mastery
Yes.
for teachers, right?
It is
It's the same
very
thing.
much like that.
Can you get me back to where
Yep.
I was?
Was yours showing on that big screen earlier?
Yes,
I don't know what I've done here.
perfect. You got it.
There we go.
All right. And so let's take a look at Pathway 4, and then we'll go back and review each one and give you an opportunity to tell us what works, what doesn't, what suggestions do you want to make. Pathway 4 is an exemplar lesson plan pathway. We would launch that in the fall of 2016. Quality colleagues will create 2 exemplar lesson plans, video the teaching of those lessons, and upload the videoed lessons into a repository of Winston-Salem Forsyth County exemplar lesson plans. The quality colleague would then host 3 face-to-face or virtual debrief sessions with colleagues about the lessons. The incentive or the compensation for that is proposed to be $500 for planning and uploading of lessons and facilitating discussions with colleagues. So let me go back to Pathway 1 and give you an opportunity to talk and for me to be quiet and think about what you're sharing with me. All of those pathways really allow you to stay in your classroom. And that was the thing that we heard loud and clear from everybody who sent us an email or came to a face-to-face meeting. So what I'd like for you to do, and we'll spend as much or as little time on each pathway as you like. Heather's going to tell me to go back over here so I can be heard. As much or as little time on each pathway as you like to tell us what works there, what doesn't work there, what are we asking you to do that you wouldn't want to do, what should be there that isn't there, how does the compensation line up with the expectation or with the work task. Oh, thank you.
How is the compensation being taxed? Under which bracket?
I do not know the answer to that. I know that Paula has been working with our finance folks to try to make that as minimal as possible. But there's some limits to how much we can minimize that. So yeah, if I gave you a percentage, I would be incorrect, but I know that those conversations are ongoing.
I think if it comes out on the 15th, I want to say that it's taxed like a month, so it's like 50%.
Right.
At least. Could be as high as.
Yeah, I know they're negotiating that. We won't get it down very low. I can tell you that. Whether it's going to live at this 50% or better, I would hope not. But those conversations are ongoing with our finance folks.
But if it's like $100 a month a year, that would probably be taxed on your regular paycheck, so that it would be taxed.
Right. So we're very aware that we would want to compensate folks in the way that it's the least taxable. We just got to figure out how to do that. Other comments about Pathway 1? Yes, ma'am.
Would the group of teachers that comes in to observe, would they be in your similar content area, or could they be in any content
In as
area?
much as possible, we would match that up. Now, the number of people who sign on to be a model classroom would determine how well we can match that up. So if you're, if there's a physics teacher that needs to go see another physics teacher, and we don't happen to have somebody like that who has said, yes, I want to be part of this work, then we wouldn't be able to match that exactly. But to the extent possible, we would match folks up to visit classrooms that are very, very similar to the content they teach and very similar to their own school.
So are you proposing this, that not that this is what they would do, but these are options that could be used to help teachers? In other words, you could, all four could happen.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So, I know you said that at the end, they would sit down and have a conference with you. And you said that they'd be happening more like during our planning time.
Right.
So are you guys then planning on, because that's what I was trying to figure out, like, let's say my planning is like at the end of the day, would we try to get them to come like at the classes before? That's what I was trying to figure out how.
Right.
would you get
So
them
the biggest reason that I said that you would be conferencing like during your planning is we want to compensate you for your time. And that is time that you're giving up. You're taking a planning period and you're giving that up so that you can do this work instead. So whether that's after school, after your regular work day, or during your planning time that should have been planning and it becomes something else, that's what allows us to compensate you for that time. So it wouldn't matter from a financial or an incentive point of view, whether that's during your planning time or after school. It's still time when you had another task, but you gave it up to do this.
Right. I guess my biggest thing was just trying to figure out, like, let's say if the only time they could come observe and teach was in the morning, but then I wouldn't have really any time to speak to them until the afternoon. So would they be having to make 2 trips to my classroom? Or, which, I mean,
It's possible, but I would hope that we could do the logistics better than that. Even if it was if you virtually debriefed with them as opposed to face, I think there's some ways that we could work that out if the scheduling doesn't line up real well. Other comments on Pathway 1?
So they come observe us.
Correct.
Now, how is this different than mentoring? Because I know I'm a mentor and my mentees go and observe other teachers.
It is similar, but it would not necessarily be just teachers who are 1 or 2 year teachers. So the biggest difference probably is that you may not have an ongoing relationship with them like you do with a mentor, and the person who comes to see you may or may not be a beginning teacher. Yes, sir.
So this is to be targeted to a group of teachers? Is that what you're
Yes, sir. Principals would have the opportunity in working with a teacher through his or her PDP to say, this is something that I think would help grow this teacher. Maybe a master teacher, maybe not, but this is something that would help grow a teacher. Yes. But if you teach something fairly unique and the person who wants to go to a model classroom teaches something fairly unique, that would affect those logistics. Other comments on Pathway 1? Pathway 2 is about peer support, which is even more like what we do with Mentor. So let me be quiet and give you a chance to read over that again. And I want to ask for the same kind of feedback. What do you see that you think works? What do you think that doesn't work? What's missing from our description? What about the incentive works or doesn't work? Yes, ma'am.
I will say, I know I'm concerned about the Saturday training and,
Okay.
and as soon as a month from now, the springtime's just crazy for a lot of people. I know that I just looked at my calendar the other day and I'm barely gonna be home any weekend. And so that's my only concern is, just such short notice.
Right.
and
Right.
Craziness of springtime.
So the Saturday trainings, and we'll talk more about this in specifics in just a minute, are not required of anybody. If you wanted to go ahead and attend this and you wanted to do it on the Saturdays in April and May, you could. That's not the only opportunity that you would have to get the same training. So it is an opportunity, but not the only one. Yes, sir.
So to make sure I'm clear, because sometimes that happens. We would be running the Saturday PD, correct?
No, you would be the receiving the PD on the 2 Saturdays.
So one part of this is working directly with 3 teachers and mentoring them a little bit more in depth than the first one.
Right. So two of the things that you all told us that you needed if you were going to work closely with other people would be how to coach adults and how to do what we call instructional rounds. So one of those Saturdays, and we'll see that in just a minute, would be how to coach adults, the coaching cycle in the district and working with adults, and instructional rounds. So the 2 Saturdays would be Paula and I and whoever else we pull in delivering that, and you would be the receivers of that professional development.
So it's like almost like a 2-part kind of thing.
Yes, sir.
Working with the teachers and the extra PD for us.
Yes.
To be more prepared.
Right. We don't expect to pair you up without any training or support because we're unlikely to be successful if we do that. So you wouldn't be paired up with anybody until fall. Spring and summer and early fall is when we would provide the support and the training that you all would need in order to be paired with somebody successfully. Mhm.
You know the dates of those 2 Saturdays?
April 23rd and May 7. Is May 7 a Saturday?
I think Saturday is the 6th,
Okay.
23rd, I know is a Saturday.
and it's May 6th. The 7th is the Sunday. Oh, no, sorry, it is May 7th.
Okay.
What time?
8 to 12, but that's negotiable.
Well, and I was just wondering, like, I know those 2 Saturdays are booked.
Right.
So does that kind of knock you out of it?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. It's just for folks, if they wanted to go ahead and get a jump on the training, this would be an opportunity, but it's certainly not the only time it would be offered at all.
What is the summer training?
That's a TBD. So right now, it looks like, and again, this is negotiable. Right now, we've sort of penciled in 4 days, and people are going to go, ooh, 4 days, and I don't blame them because I would feel that way too. So right now, it's penciled in as like 4 days at the end of July, but that is also quite negotiable. Other comments or questions about Pathway 2?
So do you, sorry.
So, yeah. Yes, sir.
You get all 3? I mean, is that incentive, you do the Saturday and the summer and then 1,000 for the whole year?
Yes, yes, and yes.
And how are you thinking, like, how many, this is $1,000 a year, how many hours a month would you be working with your 2 teachers that you're mentoring?
So I'm going to answer a question with a question and say that we have not drilled it down to number of hours, but what I'm hearing in your question is we probably need to think about that. So I'm going to take that as feedback and not try to answer it, but take it as feedback to say we need to set a minimum and a maximum number of hours that you would be committed to this work in Pathway 2.
Because mentor teachers right now are paid what, $50 an hour? 23, 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be like $100 a month.
Right. Other comments or questions about Pathway 2? Yes.
I heard that July is the last week of summer school. July is the whole month of summer school, so anyone
Okay.
teaching that.
Okay, so we may need to look at not only the number of days, but which days and not conflict with summer school, because it may be the same group of teachers that are asked to do both. Okay. Pathway 3 was the professional development pathway. Quality colleagues will commit to developing professional development and delivering professional development on the big 3: lesson planning, data analysis, mindset, and relationships. Let me be quiet and let you take a look at that and give us some feedback and some suggestions.
Lesson planning, is there gonna be some consistency? Like right now, I know they have different schools, different departments, you know, there's flexibility. But will there be consistency, a template for everyone?
So yes and no. Consistency lives within the 4 components and the expectation that all lesson plans have the 4 components. I do not anticipate that as a district we're going to go to a common template. So the way we think about developing a lesson plan and the components that should be in a lesson plan should be standardized across the district, but the template itself is not, and I don't anticipate that it will be.
We were told that it was. We had one plan. The county was using.
I'll let you read my face.
And the professional development that we would be offering, would that be offered, like, is it during a school day and with?
It could be during a school day, it could be after school, it could be Saturday. So if you look down there at the sort of the fine print at the very bottom, on all 3 of these, we've got a vetting process will be developed. So we don't want people just doing any kind of professional development. There's going to have to be a vetting process, or if you're going to post a lesson plan, if you're going to be a model classroom, there have to be a vetting process. So part of that vetting process would not only include what professional development it is that you want to present, but when it is you want to present and who's your target audience. So all of that would be negotiated before we said, yeah, we're going to present that. Other questions or comments about Pathway 3?
What is the demand for these quality colleagues? In other words, you said, I think the last meeting, you said there were 144.
I would anticipate that, depending upon what this looks like when we roll it out, and you all are going to help us determine that demand from principals, because they'll be the ones that are making those requests, will be quite high for any or all of these 4 pathways. I think we're going to have a lot of requests for, I'd like to send someone to a model classroom, or I'd like to pair someone up with peer support, or, you know, I've got a group of teachers that need some professional development. I think it's going to be quite the demand. Any other questions or comments about Pathway 3? Take a look at Pathway 4, which is our exemplar lesson plan pathway.
So the face-to-face virtual debriefing, that's with the teachers who are going through, like, watching your lessons and stuff. Who is the, I guess, the target audience with the sessions with colleagues?
So this would be about the exemplar lesson plan. So maybe you're an exemplar 5th grade science teacher, and there are other 5th grade science teachers that know you're an exemplar science teacher, and they want to take a look at the way you do lesson plans. So that could be any other 5th grade science teacher in the district, and you would be expected to have that conversation with them around that exemplar lesson plan that you developed.
Is there freedom in which plans you do, or, I mean, in which strand or whatever you're teaching, you choose?
Yes, the only thing I would say is the small print down there at the bottom is there'll be a vetting process. So if you are going to do a science lesson plan, we would want some people who have skill in teaching science to take a look at that, or if it's math, some folks who have skill in that to take a look at that. If it's kindergarten, to take a look at that. So it would be anything that's within your standards or within your content area, but we would have a vetting process to make sure that it's top notch before we call it an exemplar. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just further suggestions there. have some priority areas for lesson plans, look at the EOG scores and look at where the students are scoring the lowest,
Right.
maybe say, some priority ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe even beyond, EOG, some other content that we think is important that's not necessarily tested, because there's a lot of that content out there too, right?
Otherwise, if you have all the teachers doing lesson plans on all the same areas, there's not enough diversity maybe then.
Right, right. Other comments or questions about Pathway 4? So let's take a look at what next steps are. We are and have been recording your feedback, and we'll do that again when we have our second meeting. And we'll use your feedback to continue to sort of tweak our pathways and the support that you've expressed that you may need and the compensation that you think is appropriate. We'll make those modifications based on your feedback. That third bullet is important. This has some policy implications with our school board, because there are things we can compensate teachers for and things that we can't. And there's times of the day when we can compensate you and times of the day that we can't, on top of your regular compensation. So the next step will be, once we have this thing sort of finalized in a draft, is to make sure that our school board sees what we're trying to do and see if there are existing policies that we need to work on or policies that we need to create to allow for these pathways with our teacher leadership efforts in the district. So the first reading of this will go to our school board on March 22nd, which is like next week or something like that, pretty soon, and we'll find out where they are. So what you see here is a draft, very much a draft, because we don't know exactly what our school board will be thinking in terms of pathways and compensation. But we want to make sure that they're part of this process and also give them an opportunity to think about any policy implications as it relates to teacher leadership. You all ask about the advanced teacher training, which is optional. The first one is September the 23rd from 8 to 12, and it'll be on the coaching model and coaching adults. And the second one is Saturday, May 5th from 8 to 12, and it's on instructional rounds. You would be compensated at $25 per hour for a stipend, but again, these are optional. If you can't attend those, or you just simply don't want to attend those because spring is really busy, there'll be other opportunities to get the same content.
That's May 7th, right? Not May 5th.
Whichever day is a Saturday, May 7th.
Oh, I've got a question.
Okay.
I've been going through the advanced teacher training already with Dr. Jones, with the Chris training, and I only noticed 2 other faces in here that have gone through it. So people that have not gone through the Chris training, are they allowed to go and go ahead and go through
Yes.
the next step?
Yes, one is not a prerequisite for the other.
Okay.
So
Yes,
I think you guys said you were gonna go out to Denver maybe?
Yes.
And like watch another school system that does this. So have they seen results from this? Has it been effective?
yes, and yes. We did go to Denver, and they're way ahead of us because they've got entire modules that are built depending upon what people want to sort of get involved in, and they go into those different modules. But we're much further down the road than we were 6 or 8 or 10 months ago. So we're happy with where we are. We wouldn't want to compare ourselves to Denver, but certainly that's sort of the ideal that we're aiming for with what we're calling Teacher Academy and what we're calling Advanced Teacher Leadership.
I was just thinking, it seems like this is something that's very tailored to what not just the school, the person needs versus trying to find one model that fits everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
What's involved with instructional rounds?
So instructional rounds, I'm trying to think, Richard Elmore, if you want to read a little bit more about it, it comes from a text by Richard Elmore, and if I had to quote the other authors, I couldn't do it. But it's modeled after what doctors do and the instructional rounds that they do when a doctor's sort of an intern and you go in and you take a look and what did you see and you debrief about it and you sort of speculate what might be going on and what you do next. So that's not a very complete answer for you, but if you wanted to read more about it in anticipation of participating in that, Dr. Wilkins will be the one who will provide that PD, but there is a text called Instructional Rounds by Richard Elmore, and the training will be based on that text. Are there other questions that I can attempt to answer?
Is everyone doing haiku next year? All
Yes.
teachers?
You want to take that one, Heather? You can probably answer that better than I. Haiku question?
Yeah,
And if you
we're-
want to come over here so you can be heard.
I know.
Yes, but the timeline has not really been nailed down about exactly what that looks like. So the next step is we're working with principals to kind of take everything into account. What does the timeline look like? And there'll be a point in time where we want to transition away from the SchoolWire's traditional website so that teachers don't have to do both. But we need to make sure that they feel comfortable using haiku before we can drop that and pick up haiku. And so at first, the minimum expectation may be similar to what you see on SchoolWire site, a syllabus, information about the teacher. But then we want to make another transition to actually using it instructionally with discussion boards and wiki projects, and kids are interacting with it. So that timeline will get longer. But one of the things we've been charged with is that what needs to go into that timeline is providing support for teachers. And that's why we need you guys to be able to have you go through that master course and say, in my zone, I'm going to offer a haiku lesson planning session so that teachers feel they get support from you, they get support from us. And so that makes that happen quicker if we can get you guys to help us build capacity with teachers.
At one of our haiku trainings, one of the presenters, in kind of a roundabout way, hinted at that eventually teachers will be putting their lesson plans for their classes
Yes.
online to haiku.
Yes.
But it was kind of also, I guess, alluded to that then our lesson plans become kind of public domain if they're on our website. So therefore, any teacher really could access these lessons where we have up. So I guess my question with that is, you know, if there's kind of this side of where we're going to be creating these lessons and getting paid, but then this is, you know, if they're going to be like, to make sure that something, I don't even know how to say it, like, you know.
So let me try to answer, and you ask additional questions. So technically, any of the lesson plans you develop belong to Winston-Salem if you're employed by Winston-Salem, whether they are paper, pencil, haiku, whatever. But we're not going to go in stealing lessons that are in there or taking them without anybody's permission. But what haiku does for us is it is a platform that's very easy to share that lesson plan. So if you develop it, it's part of that pathway. And I think that's part of that might be some of the policy implications too, to be able to compensate you for a lesson plan, which is part of your employment to begin with, if we're sharing it with other people. But that does allow it to be very easily shared. There's a library feature we're not using right now, so teachers could search through content areas and pull down a lesson if that's part of what you're asked to do. Does that make sense?
Would you be able to access that if you're outside Winston-Salem for Forsyth County Schools?
No. So that's different from the public website. Your class can, right. So right now, your class, your administrators, with the technology department, we can go in and into any, class. But no, an average teacher in another school right now cannot. So to do that, we would have to say, you've developed this plan, I want to share it, it's a part of the pathway forward with lesson plans. We put it in the library, and then at that point, any teacher can access it through that library. So there has to be steps to go through to be able to do that. Good question. Any other haiku type questions?
Are there any concerns with copyright?
Yes, there are.
As a teacher
Yeah.
project.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yes, absolutely. We want to follow that. So as Amy mentioned with the vetting process, as you develop lessons, then they can't have any copyright material. It has to be
Images.
right.
Like on PowerPoints,
Right.
Images.
Unless we have express permission.
Yes. And there's lots of open source images and stuff out there. But the other thing too is it is in a closed system with just Winston-Salem. So if there was an image on one PowerPoint that was in one lesson, it's not on the open web. So I get emails from folks that pay teacher. They put it on their SchoolWire site. Anybody in America can get to it. And so then it's a big copyright violation. So I say that to say, yes, we want to follow it. But if there's one little infraction in there, it's not like we're putting it out there on the open web. It's still within our control. So.
I guess that's one of the things I was thinking about the whole copyright, because there's a lot of times as teachers, we might find an image online, put it in our PowerPoint that we use
Right.
for like our classroom only.
Right.
And that's one thing I guess I kind of feel a little nervous about if we put all this stuff on Haiku, even though that we are just intending like for our students to help increase their learning. We don't want to end up getting in trouble or the district. So, that kind of whole where it could get a little sketchy.
I think our media folks would say using that image even in your own classroom has copyright implications.
It does.
Sometimes we don't think about, but using it in any way with any audience, large or small, has copyright implications.
And fair use covers a lot of that, but yeah, it is something that we have to consider. Good question. Other Haiku questions?
So, yeah, go ahead.
Now, next year, are parents gonna be able to access our Haiku?
Yes, so we're in the process of figuring that out. Atkins is piloting that process for us right now. So parents can create their own separate account from their child, and it's a self-enrollment, kind of like how they get into Power School now. So our goal is to try to get ready to do that at the same time. When they create their Power School access, they create a separate Haiku access that logs them in to see, even if they have multiple kids in multiple schools, it's one login, one account. They see all their kids and the classes those kids are in.
Are there other comments or suggestions that you would want to make about any of the pathways that we shared?
So you're gonna do the survey sort of thing like you did.
We have not talked about doing that. Is that a request that you all would make? That we survey on the pathways and get feedback?
Are you all, so the 4 pathways are pretty much as long as the board is, okay, they are definitely gonna happen, or are we're not just choosing one pathway, right?
So what we've talked about is that folks like you might be able to tap into 2, probably not 4, but up to 2 if that's what you chose to do, but not exceeding 2.
And could you, let's say, next year you want to do 1 and 4, and then, and then the following year decide to either go down to just doing one of those or choosing a different pathway. So it's not like you're locked in
Right,
after that.
right. I would think that it would be a year-long commitment, but not a commitment longer than that.
The reason I asked about the survey, we're making comments, but do you have questions?
Do I have questions? My question is, do those pathways honor the feedback that you all shared with us? And do you think the compensation is appropriate?
Compensation is never appropriate.
I shouldn't have said it that way. Palatable, tolerable.
It's the same amount of compensation that mentors used to be paid. Is it more work than what is required for, an initially licensed teacher? No. I think there's a lot of them.
Right.
And to the point that you don't know enough to ask questions.
Is there anything that you saw in the pathways that you thought that's inappropriate, or we shouldn't be asked to do that, or a pathway that you think we should have explored that we haven't?
When are the success indicators going to be?
We anticipate that those will be done by midsummer. And that's committee sort of work, which is good, but we know that moves slowly, right? But it's not appropriate for there to be 1 or 2 people saying this is how we're going to measure it. It really needs to be a group think and collective effort to land on those. So we anticipate that we'll have those by midsummer.
Are we going to be made aware of what exactly is going on with the teacher that we're trying to help, or are we going to go in blindsided and have to figure it out on our own?
I would think that you would have access to their PDP, which should tell you a lot about what they're working on. Whether you'd have access to information beyond that, I don't think that would be the case, but you would have access to their PDP, which would tell you what they're working on.
I mean, we know that they're teachers in the red. We know that we're all teachers in the blue.
That's not necessarily true going forward, though, because
So that's changed.
The folks that you may be working with could have any sort of performance rating. It would be a matter of whether their principal selects any of those things for them to participate in. So it could be any teacher with any sort of performance rating or history.
Had they gone with merit pay, would that eliminate the stipends?
A, I don't think that'll happen, and B, if it did, I don't know the answer. I think if merit pay ever happened, and you and I may be long gone before that comes about, right? If merit pay ever happened, I think individual districts would have an opportunity to build their own merit pay plan, and things like this would be built into our merit pay plan for the district.
So kind of going with what she was saying, the people that we could eventually end up working with don't have to necessarily be your red teacher.
No,
It
sir.
could be any teacher that the principal feels the need that needs some type of extra training.
Correct.
I think that's one thing, I guess the biggest issue I've had is just with the, I guess like how they're gonna receive you being this teacher coming in, kind of, not like telling them what to do, but like, that's, I wonder, will there be kind of some talk with like the whole, like how to approach this teacher of, you know?
Yeah, so the whole coach training and coaching adults is about that. And we use a gym night model in the district, and we're going through that training right now with curriculum coordinators. And the word that comes up often in the foundation of that kind of coaching is the partnership principle, where there's not an expert and a novice, but there are partners that learn from one another, each of whom have different areas of expertise and can learn from one another. So we will very much approach it regardless of who's who or what's what from a partnership principle perspective.
That's what I was just wondering, you know, sometimes being a fairly younger teacher, sometimes that's where I just want to make
Right.
sure.
Right. The example that I used with CC's just last week was you may be the expert in the content and you may be the expert in pedagogy, but you'll never be the expert on those kids. The teacher is the expert on those kids. So the teacher brings this kind of expertise and you bring this kind of expertise, and this is a partnership where we both grow. That's our model for coaching with adults in the district.
You talk about the teachers that principals recommend,
Yes, sir.
and they're not all going to be red.
Correct.
But I think the thing that started this whole thing would be those that were in the red.
Correct.
Is that optional for that teacher? Or, in other words, if they were to come to us as a requirement, they're going to come to me differently if they're required to come to me.
Correct.
Versus they're coming to me voluntarily because they want to improve.
Right. So the driver for the teacher academy, whatever leg of the teacher academy we're talking about, is the PDP. Every teacher has a PDP. Every teacher has goals in his or her PDP, and every teacher is accountable for those goals in his or her PDP. So when you say to me, will it be required and will it be optional? The experience of doing your PDP with your principal is sort of a negotiation of what you want to work on and what he or she thinks you should work on. But once it lives in that document, there's an expectation that you're going to meet those goals and you're going to exercise the strategies that live in your PDP to meet those goals. Other questions?
Is this local funding?
Yes. Yes.
With the Saturday trainings, is it one training or?
So if you do one, I would think you'd want to go ahead and do both. So if it were me, no.
Okay.
One of them is on coaching and the coaching cycle and coaching adults, and the other one is on instructional rounds. If it were me, if I couldn't do both Saturdays, I'd wait until I could do it later. I would think of those as a series. So I'd either plan to participate in both or plan to do it another time if it were me.
Is there an advantage to doing both now?
If you got those 2 Saturdays happen to be really free Saturdays and you don't want to fool with it over the summer or in the fall, I think that's going to vary by individual.
Do you all know everything in preparation for these Saturday ones? that you will need to know later on? Is there a chance that the training might entail more information the later it goes into this process?
I will be responsible for the coaching piece, and however I deliver that on April the 23rd, I'm going to deliver that the same way in the summer, and I'm going to deliver that the same way in the fall and going forward. Dr. Wilkins is responsible for the instructional rounds, and however she delivers that in May, it's going to look the same if you do it in the summer or the same if you do it in the fall, and so on. Did that answer your question?
Nothing that we do or say as it relates to providing you all with impact is going to shape that training.
I don't want to say that your input is not going to shape it, but the coaching that we're going to do is going to be based on the Jim Knight model. So to some extent, that model is developed. The training we're going to do on instructional rounds is based on that model. So to some extent, that model is developed. Will we take input? Of course, I'm not going to say no, but the largest part of it is developed.
So since some of this has already started this year, how do we go about like when we decide which model or pathway we want to do? Is there like a form that we need, or can we just email you and say, hey, I'm interested?
So the next hurdle, I don't want to call it a hurdle, the next step, I shouldn't say hurdle, is the board approval and any policies. And so we would not ask for a commitment from anybody until we get to that point. However, we do have the green light to do the 2 Saturday sessions because that's not going to involve any board policy or board approval. But to be able to say, yes, this is the direction the district is going, these are the pathways, these are the compensation, we're going to have to make sure we have board approval for that. So we would not ask anybody to make a commitment until that happens, and that commitment will be in writing in some form or fashion. I don't want to say application process because that sounds very involved, but there'll be something like that, that is a formal commitment to say I'm on board with this for the 16-17 school year.
What's the difference between the summer training and the Saturday training?
So the Saturday training, we know what the content is. The summer training, the content is TBD right now, just to be completely honest. I'm sorry?
Exact date in the summer, you know?
What's the last Monday in July?
25th.
I think it's 25, 26, 27, 28 is what we blocked out. But again, the dates of those are negotiable and the number of days is negotiable. Yes?
Again, I'm trying to figure out, so I'm about to do my 3rd day of the Project Chris training. Why did I sign up for that?
So that was an opportunity that eventually anybody who participates as an advanced teacher will eventually get. But just like the dates in the summer, or not the summer, but in April and May, just because you didn't do it in April and May doesn't mean that you won't get the opportunity. The goal would be that anybody who is part of the advanced teacher arm of Teacher Academy will eventually get that opportunity. Some folks chose to go ahead and jump in and do it now, but others will choose or have the opportunity to do it later. Yes?
I just throw this in there. I'm in the same group that Randy Jones, from the coaching perspective, regardless of whether I coach or not. That is such good stuff. It's going to make me a better teacher, whether I do this or not. I remember it has already impacted me. It's just, I think it's that good.
We're hearing that from a lot of folks.
Will you email us this PowerPoint just so we could reference back to the?
Absolutely. So that was the way I was going to wrap up. For those of us that are face-to-face and those that are listening, you don't have to be present. I don't know if you got any questions or not. You don't have to be present to give us some feedback. So as you're thinking about this, and yes, I'll send it out, and you say, ooh, I should have said so-and-so about Pathway 1, you can email me or you can email Dr. Wilkins, and I think you know our 2 emails. And so don't feel like if you didn't share your feedback or your concern or your question while you were present that we won't address it. We will. We're an email away. If we don't know the answer, we're going to say we don't know. If we hadn't figured that part out yet, we're going to say we haven't figured that part out yet. But everything that you ask us is we're interpreting as feedback so that we can make this as tight as possible before the board takes action on it.
Let me show them where that's at.
Sure.
For the questions.
One more feedback.
I might ought to change that to May 7 instead of May 5 before you post it.
I somehow
Oh, yeah.
made it here in 25 minutes. It should take me almost 40 minutes to get here. Is there any way the meetings can be not at 4 o'clock? Because I'm all the way on the other side of the county, and I know I definitely did 70 coming.
We won't
Yeah.
tell anybody.
I mean,
You
just,
do have to leave it, I'm worried, you do have to leave at 3:30.
Right.
I mean, I couldn't.
So that was the thinking about live streaming it, so if it wasn't convenient for people to be here at 4, I know, I would be the same way, I would prefer to do it face to face, don't get me wrong. That was our, maybe meager attempt to not have to have people, travel or leave school early or whatever. If we need to think about other ways that you don't have to drive 70 miles an hour or leave school early, send us that feedback as well.
Later. I mean, we stay late all the time at school, so
Right.
it'd be great if we could come here, maybe you guys start a meeting at 4:30.
Is it our middle schools that dismiss so early?
Yeah.
That's the other thing, is trying to balance for our middle schools, because, then some of our folks, it's hard when you have K-12, because some of our folks can't get here at 4 and others are having to kill an hour to show up at 4. So, but I mean, I hear you.
Yeah, I've got my middle schooler out in the hallway doing the homework, so.
In the future, if you want to watch any of it, I was going to show you where the streaming is. So this is the Haiku site we use for digital learning. Most teachers are in this, but it's an open site. We can send you a link to get back to it. But there's a tab here for Teacher Academy, and we can send you the link directly to it. But here, it's live streaming right now, is that video. And then here's a place for questions. You just put your name in and ask a question, and those will stay, so we can answer those questions in that same kind of stream there. And then we'll post the same PowerPoint there, and if you wanted to watch the whole thing again, once this is done, it's archived and we'll go all the way back to the beginning and show the whole session there. So,
Where is the training in Haiku that you talked about earlier?
it is not up yet, so we'll, it's not anything that's public, but if you're interested in that, email me. We'll enroll you like a student, so you'll go through that blended course, and there'll be a first face-to-face to kind of show you how it works and how you can test out different things and how you can get help if you need help as you go along, but you'll be enrolled in that if you're interested in doing it. H.L. Horton.
All right, Heather and I will hang around for a few minutes afterwards. If you've got some individual questions that you want to ask, I thank you all for making the trek over here, and 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Monday after you've taught all day and you lost an hour of sleep. That's a lot to ask of you. So thank you for those of you that were here face to face, and those that might be listening. We do appreciate your attention.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Kill that video.
Send an email.
Yeah.